So today we're going to make knishes the old-fashioned way. We're going to render chicken fat, and we're going to make some gribbiness, which is the onions and the chicken skin that gets mixed up in the chicken fat and turns brown, and that will give our potato knishes the base layer of flavor that is indescribably delicious. To prepare the chicken fat, we're going to chop an onion so that it can flavor the chicken fat, because we're looking for a really highly flavored stuffing for the knishes. So when I was a little girl, really little, my grandparents lived in a place called Brighton Beach in the faraway country of Brooklyn, New York. And it was a very heavily Jewish community. And one of our favorite places to go was Mrs. Stahl's Knishes on Brighton 7th Street. And Mrs. Stahl made the best knishes in the world. She specialized in potato and kasha. I never really liked the kasha, but it was a favorite of the grandma's. They also made meat and spinach and other weird flavors, but for me it was always the potato knish. That was the best. We're going to render all of this chicken fat that we've saved. We're certainly not going to use it all, but we'll render the chicken fat and these pieces of chicken skin. And the chicken skin will cook all the way down and become this gribbiness. And that gribbiness will help flavor and inform the knishes. To give it a little flavor. Here we are rendering all of the chicken fat and cooking it down with onion and chicken skin to both render out the chicken fat and to make some of this great oniony, chicken skinny gribbiness, which is sinfully delicious and painfully bad for you because it's totally saturated fat. But it's a treat. The chicken fat has rendered out, the onions are nice and brown, and the gribbiness is really crispy. So we're going to pour off the chicken fat that we'd like to keep into this pan. And then we're going to save the onions and the gribbiness for another use. Gribbiness and rendered chicken fat, which is a little darker than normal because of the onions. Usually it's a golden yellow color. This, oh, crazy. Dina?
Right, so now,
Yes?
this is extra, right?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
That is gribbiness. Yeah. Oh, so bad and so good.
Jewish pork rinds.
Yep.
My brother and I would fight over these when they were produced.
So you had a grandma that made them for you, but I didn't and you didn't. You went to Mrs. Stahl's, but your grandma actually cooked.
Actually, my grandmother didn't make knishes.
No, all of our grandmas made gribbiness for chopped liver.
Oh.
But it was very rare for them actually to make knishes.
My grandmother didn't make knishes. She made blintzes.
Oh.
My grandmother made
But
blintzes.
she had a friend, a
My
neighbor
mother
in the
made
building, who did make knishes. And she knew I loved them, and so she would bring them down. And she did them, instead of individually, she would do them long and put little cuts in them so you'd get this big long thing and you can just break off.
Yeah.
They were a thing when I was a kid. And it was mostly summertime. For some reason they were at the beach communities, not in my neighborhood, you know, not as a regular thing. It wasn't like a Knish store.
Mm-hmm.
But at the beach, there were two on in Brighton, there was Mish's Stalls, and in Rockaway, it was Jerry's Knishes. And it was, you know, the kind of thing a teenager could buy cheaply, 2 Knishes, and you were tanked.
The recipe calls for 2½ large onions. That's pretty much what we've got here, maybe a little bit less, so we may have to add a little more, but we also have some onions cooking down with the chicken fat, so we may use some of that as well. All right, so for me, it feels easiest to, you don't slice all the way through if you can help it, so that it maintains its shape and the onions sort of stay. My knife skills are not excellent. I prefer when Robbie chops. We're going to peel the potatoes and put them in an ice water bowl. And putting the potato, you can leave the potatoes in ice water for as long as you want. Putting them in cold water leaches out some of the starch, and they cook better that way. It's really good when you're making French fries to leave the potatoes for a few hours in ice water. You can just do it and stick them in the refrigerator if you like, or leave them out. In a timed potato peeling competition, I can out-peel my daughters. So for the knishes, since basically what we're doing is a kind of enhanced mashed potato, we're going to parboil these, or boil them, so I'm just going to cut them in chunks. And then before we cook them, we'll cut them in smaller chunks. And we've got all our onions, 2½ onions, really well chopped. We have potatoes standing by in cold water. So we're going to cook the potatoes as soon as the water in this pot comes to a boil. And we're going to do the onions as soon as this pan gets a little warmer. Adding a little salt and pepper to the onions so that they're fully flavored. So we are cooking the potatoes so we can mash them, so we want them to boil enough so we can put a knife through the thickest pieces. So for example, not quite done, there's a lot of resistance in the middle. I think we need a couple more minutes. And over here we're browning the onions. We don't want them to burn, but they are already reduced by half the amount that we had in here. So we want to reduce them down. So there's a similar amount for the potatoes, and we want them to have a little bit of brown so they have a little bit of extra flavor. So I started cooking when my mother went back to work. I was 14 and she went to work in Manhattan at the 20th Century Fox Film Library. And she would do the shopping on the weekends, and I would make simple recipes out of a great cookbook that she had. And it had a recipe that we would call Lot You Care Now, which was our first Chinese recipe, and it was basically beef and broccoli and oyster sauce. It was very simple, but it was something that we loved and was a staple for us because it was easy for me to stir fry. We did a lot of stir-fry dishes with chopped meat. We were on a pretty severe budget, so we did a lot of green vegetables and rice and chopped meat stir-fries. And actually, Robbie and I did that when we were first together. It was the cheapest way we could eat. We would also save up our coins until we had $7 a piece, and we would go to Yanqing, the local Chinese restaurant, for a bowl of noodles. So we're going to test the potatoes one more time, but they look done, and when you put a knife through, the knife cuts right through. You don't want them any softer because you don't want them to just completely fall apart. So now we're going to strain them. Whoa. The onions are cooked down. They've reduced by more than half. And they're golden but not burnt. We you want them to have a little bit of flavor, and they get that when they get this sort of goldeny overall color, but you don't want them to be dark brown and have a burnt flavor. So we're going to put the potatoes in a nice big bowl and mash them down. The best potato masher in our family is Kate Greenberg. It makes perfect mashed potatoes every time. And you want them mashed for this, but not pureed. So we've got a beautiful bowl of mostly mashed potatoes. Now we're going to take the onions and mix them right into the potatoes. Make sure that all of the onion is incorporated into the potato. Pretty good, needs a little bit of salt. And a bit of... I'm just using a ½ cup measuring cup for no good reason. Measuring out half. And 2½ cups of flour. I'm going to leave this little excess flour here to help us with our dough. And then we're going to add 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. So, half and 1/4. We're going to put in a teaspoon of baking powder. Make sure your baking powder is current, because it definitely does go off. So, our wet ingredients include a ½ cup of warm water and a ½ cup of oil or chicken fat, it says. So what I'm going to do is actually a 1/4 cup of this rendered chicken fat and a 1/4 cup of peanut oil. And we're going to whisk that. Okay, and then we're going to add the wet ingredients to the dry ingredients. I can already smell the goodness of the chicken fat in this dough. Okay, so the idea is to get all of the liquid mixed into all the flour. Takes a few minutes to do, but as soon as it starts to come together, you switch from the fork to the fingers so that you can use your hands to feel the dough, which is nice and warm because of the warm liquid ingredients. By the way, always let your egg come to room temperature before you use it. It's just a better way. Then you knead the dough for a few minutes as it all comes together. Smush it and knead it. Feels a little bit dry to me, so I'm going to get a few more drops of warm water. Help incorporate these last bits of flour in the bottom and make, as Ethel says, a nice soft dough. So it all comes together. I wish Robbie was here because he really is the master of dough texture. But as you can see, this came together really nicely. Okay, you cover your dough with plastic and leave it to rest for an hour or two. Yeah, as usual, you weren't here for the dough, and
I mean, it looked... Oh, maybe not. No, it's fine.
Yeah?
No, you're good.
Yeah?
Yeah. You're good. I mean, according to the...
We're good.
To the video we watched, I mean, she had wet dough. She said if it was a little damp,
Okay,
add
a little bit of
flour.
flour. Okay. Getting ready to put the knishes together, and we need to prepare an egg wash. So we're going to crack this egg, and the egg wash that this recipe calls for is just the yolk and a teaspoon of water that you brush on. Okay, so we're going to take our first piece of dough. We've split the dough into 4 pieces, and put a little bit of flour on the surface, put a little flour on the dough, and a little flour on the rolling pin. So pound it down a little bit. So the idea is to roll out a rectangle that's about 12 by 18. So let's see where we go. The dough actually smells so good. And it's warm because the water that made it was a little warm and it hasn't been refrigerated. That looks pretty thin to me. I think I am going to give this just an edge. Okay, a little bit of peanut oil. Brush a little oil along one edge. So we're going to take enough potato, and we have to stay an inch away from all of the edges to roll the potato into the knish. You have to roll the sides in so that you don't leave any edges. Roll it over, and again, roll the sides in. Roll it nice and tight. Get the edges inside. So you cut the dough and save it, and seal the edges of the side that has the oil. So the idea is that you cut it with the side of your hand, you break off the dough, and then you pinch the ends and seal them by turning them and flattening them. So it should be a little dumpling. And then you take these little dumplings and you oil the bottom of the pan with enough oil so that they don't stick. And then take the knish and put it upside and downside, and then let it rest right there. The tops should be perfectly golden brown. These are a little bit lighter than we like them, but we know that they're fully baked because we tried one. And now we're just going to let them cool so we can eat them. And here they are. They are light and delicious. The bottoms are slightly crunchy, and whoo, they're hot. So, should we try one?
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, huh?
Pick one out.
This one's cooled down a little bit.
Yep. No, take a bite and let us know what you think. Does it make you think of your grandma? Really? Mm.
This is not a West Coast thing.
Okay. This one, we took a little of the onions that we used to render the chicken fat and added them in. And they made the potato filling even more savory and delicious. They are quite good, Robbie.
They're really good.